Looking at the bottom right of this picture, you can see the second event that we're going to look at, which is where Jesus cast demons out of a man into pigs. This event is found in the book of Matthew, chapter 8, verses 28 through 34, and the book of Luke, chapter 8, verse 22 through 24. But we're going to use Mark's account, which is found in the book of Mark, chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. Let's read it together. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with the unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. And the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." For he said to them, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine, that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea, and drowned in the sea. So those who fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion sitting and clothed in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it had happened to him who had been demon-possessed, and about the swine. Then they began to plead with him to depart from their region. And when he got into the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends, and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he has had compassion on you." And he departed, and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. Jesus had just calmed the sea, and now he and his disciples had arrived at their destination, which was in the country of the Gadarenes. We see in verse 2, as soon as Jesus steps out of the boat, a demonic man approaches him. The man may have been watching the boat out on the sea, and when it got to the shore, he was going to go down and terrorize the people on it, not knowing the Son of God was on that boat. We see in verses 3 through 5 that the demons had driven him out of the town where the other people lived, and now he lived out in the tombs, which would have possibly been caves. The people in that area had tried many times to bind him with chains and shackles, but he was able to break them off. No one was able to control him. The people could hear this man during the day and the night yelling out. The demons drove him to consistently mutilate his body with rocks. We see in verse 6 that when the demons recognized that it was Jesus, they had the man run to and worship him. The other people may not have known who Jesus truly was, but these demons knew. We see in verse 7 and verse 8 that Jesus had told the demons to come out of the man, and the demons speak through this man and begin to scream out and tell Jesus they know who he is, and they begged him to have mercy on him. Luke's account says they asked Jesus not to cast them into the abyss, which would have been the bottomless pit talked about in the book of Revelation, chapter 20, verse 3. Jesus, of course, knew who they were, but he asked them their name in verse 9, and they tell him Legion, since there were thousands of demons dwelling in this man. We don't know exactly how many demons were in this man, but a legion of Roman soldiers usually refers to anywhere from 3,000 to 12,000 men. In verse 10, the demons continue to beg Jesus not to cast them into the abyss. We see in verse 11 and verse 12 that there was a large herd of pigs feeding in the fields, and Jesus was begged by the demons to send them into the pigs instead of the abyss. These demons knew their destiny was the abyss, but they did not want to be thrown into the bottomless pit any sooner than they were going to be. Even though the people in that country could not control this man, we see that Jesus can and does. Matthew's version says Jesus simply said, "Go," when the demons begged him to be cast into the pigs. Here in verse 13, we see that Mark says Jesus gave them permission to go into the pigs. This shows Jesus' power over the demons to all those who were watching what was taking place. We see there were about 2,000 pigs there, and can you imagine the sight seeing those 2,000 pigs running down that hill as fast as they could into the sea? We see that those pigs drowned there, so it's most likely at that point these demons were sent to the abyss. We see in verse 14 that those who fed the pigs ran into the city and told everyone what had happened. Those who ran in the city would not have been the owners, but they simply would have been the hired hands who were tending the sheep. They possibly ran as fast as they could to tell the owners what had happened so that they would not be blamed for the massive loss of these 2,000 pigs. Those in the city came out to see for themselves how Jesus had healed this demon-possessed man. We see in verse 15 that when they saw this man sitting there as though he had never been possessed by those demons, they were afraid. They had possibly got used to him yelling out and acting the way he did, so now that he was healed, they knew that this man Jesus had power that was greater than those demons had, and they were greatly afraid of Jesus. Then in verse 16 and 17, we see that those who saw the event take place there came to the city and told them in detail what had happened. We do not know why they begged Jesus to leave. It could possibly be because they were afraid to be around him after he demonstrated his power over the demons, and it could also possibly be because they were upset at the great loss they had encountered in losing these 2,000 pigs. For whatever reason, they do not want to hear the message of eternal life that Jesus was bringing to this country, so Jesus did not try and persuade them to listen. We see in verse 18 that he left them as they asked him to, and he went and got back on the boat. The man who had the demons cast out of him begged Jesus to let him travel with him and be a part of his ministry. However, we see in verse 19 that Jesus wanted to use this man in his own country and to help spread the gospel there, so he tells him to go tell his friends the great things that he had done for him. This man would have had a great testimony to share with people. In verse 20, we see that this demon-possessed man begins sharing the gospel in Decapolis. Look at the picture and you'll see where part of Decapolis was. This area was made up of 10 cities, so this man would have most likely been the person who started planting the seeds of eternal life in this area. We can learn from this event that Jesus can cast out our worries and concerns if we'll let him. We can also learn from this event that we don't have to go to foreign fields to sow seeds of eternal life. We can sow them in our own backyard, that is, in our own city and town, just as this man did after Jesus cast out the demons who were in him. Just click on the video that says The Ministry of Jesus on and around the Sea of Galilee, Part 3, to continue.